Hello everyone, and welcome to the Senior Leader Series. Today, I've got a special guest with me. I've got Mr. Vance Stewart. He's the Director of Investment for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Finance and Comptroller, and he's a member of the Senior Executive Service. Mr. Stewart, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Corey. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So can you explain to me a little bit about your role as the Director of Investment for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Finance and Comptroller?
Sure. I'm responsible for the 11 appropriations that make up the research development, test evaluation, procurement, and military construction portfolios. That's about $26 billion annually. And what we do is we build, submit, and defend those requests, those annual requests to Congress. And then once we get an appropriation act signed by the President, then we distribute those funds to the field, to the commands across the Army, and allow them to buy the equipment and other things that they need to for those purposes. We're the B and the E within the PPBE process. That's important because we literally buy everything that the Army consumes. So soldiers and civilians, whether they use it, they train on it, they live in it, they work in a building, that all comes from our directorate. So it's a pretty important part, and we're pretty proud to be a part in that process.
So that obviously seems like a real massive portfolio that you deal with on a daily basis, and obviously the Army is just ingrained in so many different things that your office works on. So what are some of the challenges that you face?
So the biggest challenge is the lack of predictable funding. We've really been conditioned for the last 10, 15 years to operate under a continuing resolution. And generally those are of somewhat short duration, 90 days or less. The longer those get drawn out, the more difficult it becomes. And then coupled with the Army's can-do spirit, it really masks some underlying complications. As the CRs get longer in duration throughout the year, as we experienced last year, it just makes our flexibility less and less, and makes decisions harder for commanders at all levels. And what it really leads to then is a sub-optimization of our funds, and we get forced to make decisions under a CR that we wouldn't make had we had an approved budget. And so it's just difficult at all levels, and in some cases there's opportunity costs where decisions get made that really can't be undone later, like at a training event, for example. If we choose not to do it in the first quarter, you may not be able to make it up at the end of the year. So that's difficult. And I think our second challenge across the Army at all levels is how we communicate with our external stakeholders, whether that be the Congress, the defense industry, American public at large. We've really got to have a consistent message that we all stick to, and tell everyone the great things that we are doing and on behalf of the nation.
So from my understanding it's basically what you're trying to get at is the right kind of balance. I assume that you're trying to balance several different things to try to find the best mixture in order to move the Army forward. That's kind of what I'm understanding. No,
absolutely. So if you think in a metaphor, of a balloon of the Army budget, the Army's really got three major drivers in that, and that's the manpower, Army readiness, and modernization. So we all know that the Chief of Staff and our Acting Secretary have prioritized readiness as our first priority. And so in order to generate more funding within a static budget, right, we've got to squeeze the balloon at one of those other two points to make the funding grow in the third. So it's a constant challenge because, of course, manpower is another big driver of our budget. So really, often modernization becomes the area that is forced to be reduced. But it's difficult at the corporate level here at HQDA to maintain the balance between those three big drivers.
So obviously you have a lot of challenges on a day-to-day basis, obviously dealing with the 11 appropriations and the different portfolios that you manage. But what do you enjoy most out of your job?
The product that we produce annually is the President's Budget Request, which is a series of justification books that go to the Congress, and they use that to create the appropriations bill. And so when that gets enacted by the President, then that turns into tangible funding that we send out to the different commands across the Army. And that translates into buying all that equipment, weapon systems that I discussed earlier. And that gets the right and the best type of equipment we can into the hands of soldiers and our civilians so that they can accomplish their assigned missions. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. The other thing I enjoy is working with the different staff functional proponents across the Secretariat and the Army staff here in the building. So it's pretty neat as a financial manager to be able to interact with folks that are working in other, I'll say, stovepipe functions, and learning what's important to them and what the priorities they're working on, and the ways that we can help them with their funding solutions so that they can best do their jobs.
Just seems to me that when you, in your kind of position, it seems kind of neat because you can go around to all the different staff offices and kind of get a much larger perspective of the Army as a general. That must be great for educational purposes and to understand the Army as a whole.
That's exactly right. And the other thing we can provide is, you know, we come without a bias, right? So we're not involved day to day in that portfolio or that program. So if folks want to reach out to us and get our advice on a proposal or a way ahead, then that's nice always when somebody asks you to do that and you can provide that. So it's pretty neat to be able to do that as well.
So you've just talked about going to the various different Army staffs and learning a little bit more of the Army as a whole. So that kind of brings me to my next question. So how do you see engagement between the CP26 community, Manpower and Force Managers, and the CP11, the Comptroller communities?
So when I think resource management, I think of it in three variables. I think of dollars or funding, people, and then of course time. So there's no career field for time management, right? That's a responsibility we all have to share. But the other two variables, the funding and the personnel, are really the domains of these two career fields, CP26 and 11. So I think commanders and other leaders look to us to be the experts in those domains, and they want to hear our recommendations on how to make the best decisions with those two components. And so what I'd really like to see for us is to become more functionally fluent in each other's domains, so that we can combine the expertise and the synergy between those two variables and really set up solutions to problems so that commanders can make the very best decisions for their organizations. I think that's really important.
So it's funny you mentioned the being functionally fluent between CP26 and CP11. So what benefit is achieved, in your opinion, by the collaboration between these career programs?
Right. As we were talking, you know, we're both resource managers. And again, commanders are looking for us to provide balanced and complementary recommendations to make decisions to solve problems or issues within the command and really maximize both of those resources. But then I think there's a third party that needs to be included in our triad or our three-legged stool here, and that's the G1 HR community, or CP10. You know, generally we think of, at an organizational level, we think of dollars, faces, and spaces, right? So the dollars are the domain of CP11, the spaces are the domain of CP26, and so the CP10 fulfills the domain for the faces or the personnel that are currently on hand in the organization. And so when you include that execution dynamic of who's actually on board, combined with the authorizations and the funding, now you've got three parties working together, and it really can create a positive force for the entire organization and really create some flexibility for the command, not only in the year of execution, but then the upcoming budget year.
Because if you don't have those three communities, if you don't have that three-legged stool to sit on, you're never going to have an SF50.
Absolutely. And what that does then is it allows the commander not only to divert budget dollars, but perhaps he may want to move his FTEs or his spaces to a different part of the organization to accomplish a new mission that he's been assigned. So you get those three domains together, and it's really a help not only the commander but the whole rest of the staff and the organization writ large. So really neat when it works well.
So it's funny you mentioned the three-legged stool analogy. That's a really cool mental picture in my mind, and I think it's a great characterization of the three communities and how they kind of all support the individual, whether it be a soldier or a civilian. So in your opinion, what can be done to strengthen the bond between these communities?
So that's great because that's an individual effort, right, for all of us. So first part is really just networking and interacting with your colleagues, your peers across the staff of the organization where you're working. And it's a give and take. It's a share and learn on both parties You teach me your domain and the skills that are important to you, and I'll share with you mine. And together that gets to the fluency that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so the more of that you can do is just a powerful multiplier for the command. The other thing is take advantage of formal education. So, if I was a CP26, if I was advising a CP26 person, I would say, hey, you need to enroll in DoD FM certification and help bolster that informal knowledge you're gaining with your peers with some formal training. And then likewise for CP11 folks, I'd recommend that they attend the Manpower Force Management courses to gain a deeper understanding of that. So the end result of both that formal and informal learning process is a more experienced person who's working on the staff and again, it's working toward the greater goals of the organization and advancing it further.
So let's switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about management and leadership a little bit. So I understand that you're an SES, and so in your office you have soldiers and you have civilians. So how have you found it different from managing soldiers to managing civilians?
So I really don't think fundamentally it's different, right? Both groups, they want to be assigned a task. They want to be given the resources to do it, given clear guidance, and then clear any obstacles. The leader clears the obstacles so they can get it accomplished. So really, I don't see any difference at all. What I do see in the leadership, more toward the mentorship of both groups, is they really have different human resource life cycles, right? With the soldiers, it's a pretty set piece, up or out promotion system. Soldiers all know the gates that they need to meet for promotion, and developmental assignments are provided to them at regular intervals, and sometimes the only thing they get to choose is their duty location, right? Civilians, on the other hand, completely the opposite, right? Each employee has exclusively complete control over their career field and their pace of advancement based on their individual desires. So that's completely acceptable as well. And you've got the gamut of employees who want to move up rapidly and advance, and you've got other employees who are completely comfortable with their situation, their current situation and job. So all those outcomes are acceptable. And so I think the leader, be it military or civilian, and whether they're leading military or civilian, they've got to understand that difference. And then they've got to sit down and have meaningful conversation with that soldier or civilian employee and sort through what their needs and desires are and help them accomplish that.
So let's keep on the same leadership, management, and let's bring back in that three-legged stool, which is just a wonderful metaphor visually. So what advice would you give for someone who's looking to grow their career and be that multifunctional civilian?
First step I'd recommend is to go find a coach or a mentor, whatever label you want to use, a role model, somebody that's successful that you look up to, that could give you advice and kind of help you think your way through your career. And that could be somebody in your career field or outside of it. Individual choice there. So the next step would be to create an individual development plan and use that as your vehicle to help you, again, think through the different facets of your life and the different components of your career. I think it's got to be a good mix of civilian education, formal military courses, and then look and see what developmental positions are out there, like we talked previously. What are the next level positions for increasing responsibility that someone in your series and grade should be looking forward to. I also think that the Army CES or Civilian Education System courses are a great educational opportunity. I had a chance to spend a week with the advanced course last summer out at Fort Leavenworth, and they've really got a great curriculum, and students are really engaged and to a person really enjoyed the process and felt like when they came back to their organizations they were a better person for it, both personally and professionally. So make sure you include that in the IDP as well. And then for those folks who really want to continue progressing toward the pinnacle of their career field, I think that's great. Go for it. I think the biggest challenge there for civilian employees is you got to be ready, willing, and able to move. And by that I mean You need to search out positions at the different echelons across the Army, installation, the Army commands, direct reporting units, even here at the Pentagon. I think the value of working at those different echelons and again, jobs of increasing responsibility within your career field or your series is really key to becoming a senior leader and an expert in your career field.
It's just like you hear quite often, mobility enhances chances.
No, absolutely, right. And I understand there's a tension between folks who have ties to the local community and other family commitments. I completely get that, and I understand that. And that's something that each person's got to sort through and determine the best mix for themselves professionally and personally and professionally. So
it's not even moving geographically. I mean, for instance, we're here in the National Capital Region. You've got every government agency. We're here in the Pentagon. We've got every military agency's kind of got a thing. So maybe you work on this type of floor in this corridor. Maybe you move, and maybe you, like you said, go to the Navy, or you just change within your organization and do something different as well.
Right, and there's opportunities like that at a Fort Hood or a Fort Bragg or perhaps down in the Tidewater region of Virginia, where you have Army and Navy installations and in the same proximity, and Air Force. So, I mean, there's opportunities there. I think you just have to broaden your aperture a little bit and see what's feasible, what's possible to the individual employee. And again, there's no wrong answer here, right? It's all personal preference, and you got to put all those variables in the mix and determine what's the best outcome.
Well, Mr. Stewart, that's all I have for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thanks, Corey. I really appreciate the opportunity today and in this dialogue that we had. So I'd like to start off by thanking everybody for their part that they perform for the Army, and know that their individual and collective contributions are really making positive outcomes for our Army, and that's important, not only within our institution, but the nation at large, too. I talked earlier about my personal satisfaction in my current role, but really what it boils down to is the great people I get to work with every day, and knowing that together we're doing a small part within this big organization to send funding out to all the soldiers and civilians out to the camps, posts, and stations across the globe. So I enjoy it a lot, and I appreciate everything that folks are doing out there. So thank you again.
Well, Mr. Stewart, thank you for what you do every day to take care of soldiers and our Army, and I really appreciate you coming down. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Corey. Thank you.